choose us as a tutoring company, you choose Kaplan, you don't tutor at all, that time on your own is really important. Your students who come to us work, they're with us between an hour and a half and 4 or 5 hours max in a given week, and that's a lot. But they still need to spend 10 hours, depending on the plan, outside on their own study for these tests in order to do the best and to see that delta in score that they often want to see. And that really depends on, it also depends on how big a gap do you want and what do you aspirationally want to do as well. And then, I mentioned this multiple times throughout, but stay informed in terms of when it comes to admission standards, timing, all that stuff, right? So there's a fair amount of information online now, obviously for every school, so you can figure out what do they require, what do I need, do they take the Common App, do they not take the Common App, do they require SAT 2 subject tests, what does a typical profile of a student look like who goes there? There's a website, I'm blanking on it,
Yeah.
if I remember. It's a website where you can plug in your school and your GPA
Yeah.
and SAT, ACT.
Is it the one that starts with an N?
And yeah.
No, no.
Navient,
Yeah.
where you can plug in your profile and see how you're doing that school. It's important that you look at that to help develop that target list of schools as well. But most importantly, don't be intimidated by the test. It's only a part of the application. There's definitely lots of ways and lots of material out there and lots of ways to get help on it.
This is a typical length of time from the beginning of the
Yeah, it really depends. But like by and large, I recommend everyone take their first test the latest the spring of their junior year. I think it's pretty prudent to start preparing for that if you're taking let's say a June test or an April test, depending on other pressures and commitments, that they start preparing kind of the start of the year for that. That generally gives them 10 or 11 real weeks of preparation. The thing that tends to happen is that students have midterms, they have sporting events, whatever it happens to be. Not every week's as good as the other weeks in terms of prep. But devoting between 10 and 12, 10 to 16 weeks is a pretty good amount of time to be preparing for that test, depending on the student. And obviously, if you have a student who comes in and they get, their national merit scholar, well, that's different, right? Like how they prepare for the SAT. You often know that with PSAT scores, obviously. Yeah.
Do you find sophomores coming in starting to get tutored already?
Yeah, we often do. It really depends on. There's a handful of students who are ready for that, right? They've had the high school material. They're ready to take that test and do decently on it. Depends on what classes they've had. It's often a decent time to do it because they don't have the same pressures in terms of class load and other expectations as they do their junior year. The junior year tends to be packed with a lot of this stuff. So we do see students in that, and we do subject tutoring and other things as well. We often spend a lot of time with sophomores, or more high achieving sophomores, getting them ready for their first AP exams, right? Which is a good, get a couple fives, and you're in a pretty good place. And one other change that's occurring is the SAT for the first time in quite some time, maybe 25 years, is offering an exam in August 2017. So they're doing after January this coming year. The SAT normally has a January exam. They're getting rid of that exam, and they're going to replace that with an August exam. And one of the ideas is for people who have that summer and have that time, that they can prepare for that exam as opposed to taking it during the school year to kind of give them a bigger block. It depends on your time commitments, obviously, in the summer, but the summer is also a great time to prepare for those tests. Any other questions? Cool. Well, feel free to come up and ask us anything you want. Our website's up there if you want to take a look at that. We also have a sheet of information up here, as well as a complimentary new SAT diagnostic that's on the table up here as well. So if you want to try your hand at it and see how you do, it's shorter than the normal SAT, so you don't need to spend 3 hours on it. It's a 40-minute test, but it'll give you a rough idea of roughly where you're going to score on that SAT, and also give you an idea of how you're going to do and what sections you need more work on, and the different sub-scores and things like that.
And we have a sign-up sheet as well if you want to put yourself on our mailing list when we're pushing out updates or blogs or whatever it may be, and if it ever seems less useful, you can always opt out later.
One more question.
Yeah, of course.
How close is the PSAT that a lot of the sophomores take, the beginning
it's a decent gauge, right? Like it'll tell you how they're trending. It also give you a score relative to other 10th graders nationally and see how they're doing relative to their peer set. So it's good in that perspective. It's hard to gauge exactly what the score will be from that, especially that sophomore test, because as you mentioned, they haven't had all the content. And math is a perfect example where they often haven't had, a good portion of that. But it's a decent gauge. Even if we have students who come to us their junior year and they've only taken, it's rare, we have had this occasionally happen, I've only taken their sophomore year PSAT for whatever reason, we'll make them take another diagnostic with us and say like, let's see where you are now, because you've had a year of content and a year to mature and get better at taking tests.
But like the other thing that's useful is that thematically, like the relative strengths and weaknesses are useful on the PSAT.
Yeah, that's right. Except for the
Like
math.
where you'll end up focusing and where there's room for improvement. There's learning there as well. So part of that gap can be bridged through content, but to some degree, part can be bridged through practice.
That's right. Cool. Well, feel free to come up and ask any questions and grab materials, and thanks a lot for coming tonight.